This is Frankly MSP, where managed service providers get real.
Hey, and welcome to episode 14 of Frankly MSP, the podcast for managed service providers who want to boost their productivity, efficiency, and profitability. I'm your host, Jennifer Tribe. If you're not growing, you're dying. How many times have you heard that phrase or something like it when it comes to running your business? You probably feel a certain pressure to be growing, right? To be growing quickly, to be growing big. That's the conventional wisdom on what to do. I mean, many of the awards in our industry reward this very thing. Companies that grow the biggest, companies that grow the fastest. On the flip side, you'll often hear the term lifestyle business bandied about, and it's often used a bit dismissively, almost as if it's implying that the owner isn't really serious about success. But how big do you really need to be? Is constant growth always best or even necessary? David Pence is the CEO of Acumen IT, based in South Carolina, and he has an interesting take on this question. Later in the show, I talked to him about his epiphany moment and how it led him to make some uncommon choices in his managed services business. But first, MSP consultants Richard Tubb and Karl Palachuk take a look at what's going on in the world through an MSP lens.
You're listening to Frankly MSP, brought to you by Avic Networks.
Hi everyone, Richard Tubb here in a very wet and windy London, where I've been attending the Continuum European Partner Summit. Welcome to What's Going On, and I'm joined today by Karl Palachuk, who is at home in what I hope is a much sunnier Sacramento, California, Karl.
Well, I wouldn't say we're necessarily sunny, but sunnier than London.
Definitely. So if you can hear the wind and the rain lashing right now, I apologize. I'm holed up in a hotel room here, and it's not too pleasant. So I'm looking forward to heading back home to Newcastle upon Tyne. As I mentioned, I've been at the Continuum European Partner Summit, and I thought, Karl, I'd just start out by talking about a few of the stories from that event, if that's okay.
Sure.
Cool. So really good event, 400 plus registrants, predominantly UK MSPs coming along to this European Partner Summit. But we also had an MSP from America, we had MSPs from Australia, and plenty from around Europe as well. Some great presentations. The day was kicked off by Bob Kosis, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Continuum. Bob was actually presenting on a really interesting book called Winner's Dream. Bob made sure that everybody who attended the Continuum European Partner Summit got a copy of Bill McDermott's book. Looking forward to reading it. In a classy move, I think Bob started out by giving a tribute to Andrew Stewart. So one of the sadder pieces of news this week, Andrew, the Chief People Officer at Datto, sadly passed away. So there was a moment of silence for Andrew there. He will be sorely missed. And our thoughts go out to everyone at Datto and Andrew's family and friends as well.
That's a very nice gesture and demonstrates how much of a community we exist in.
Indeed. And I was shocked to get the news about Andrew. Everybody obviously gutted. The theme of the day really at the Continuum European Partner Summit was community. Bob went on to talk about a lot of different partners from not just Continuum, but from Ovic and others as well. So really good conference. But specifically, I'll talk about Bob's presentation on Bill McDermott's book, Winner's Dream. We'll include in the show notes there a link to that book. But Bob basically boiled it down to three areas that he'd learned from his mentor, Bill McDermott, who's the top man at SAP. And he talked predominantly about being hungry, empathy, and trust being the ultimate human currency. It was a fantastic presentation. I think what I'm going to do is actually put together a blog post across at Tubblog where I look at this in more detail. But there was a really nice video from Bill McDermott of SAP, which was just a great thing to see. He's a high-ranking official at SAP, and he took time out of his day to record a video for the Continuum European Partner. So that was very good of him. But yeah, be hungry. Bob talked about hard work, hustle, a strong work ethic, integrity, and a combination of these three will get you past most obstacles in life. Bob went on to talk about empathy, how you really need to put yourself in the customer's shoes, understand what's going on in their world and be empathetic for it. We also then got a presentation from Alec Hoffman of Ovic. Alec was speaking about basically networking and the Ovic product. And Alec said something interesting that I want to know if you think you agree with. Networking is like plumbing. Nobody cares about it when it's working. but everybody cares about it when it isn't working.
Well, that's certainly true.
Yeah, and if anybody's not familiar with Alex Hoffman there, the Hoff as we call him, Alex is one of the co-founders of Ovic and really gave a fantastic account of Ovic and the company to all the MSPs present. I know we're on the Ovic podcast here, Carl, so we don't want to look as though we're sort of shilling for Ovic or just talking about Ovic, but really they've built themselves a fantastic reputation within the industry within a short period of time. And I think that was reflected here. There was a huge queue of MSPs going to speak to Chris Tim, Ovic's first employee here in the UK, and talk about what Ovic can do for MSPs. And what's your experience been with Ovic and the wider market there, Carl?
Well, I haven't personally used the product because I've been out of the business for a little bit, but the only things I've heard about it have been very good. So.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line from Alex's presentation here was an eye-opener that Ovic's system complements RMM. So it's not a replacement, and that's why Ovic was speaking at the Continuum Partner Summit. Continuum want to be the technology hub that MSPs connect all their various technologies, such as Ovic, into as well. So there's a number of other presentations that day. There was a fantastic presentation from Michael George, the CEO of Continuum, and he was talking about the war on cybercrime. Lots of Sun Tzu quotes, the art of war there. Just talking about how cybercrime is something that's hugely important to MSPs now. And again, a little bit like Alex Hoffman talking about networking like plumbing. Everybody expects it to work and everybody takes it for granted until it doesn't work. Michael George's presentation about cybersecurity was pretty much the same. He was saying that, people take it for granted that MSPs are going to keep their clients' network secure until it doesn't happen.
And it's the classic situation. If you're attacking, you can attack anywhere you want. If you're defending, you have to defend everything. We're entering an era where I think monitoring the network for anomalies is going to be far more important than it ever has been.
Yeah,
everybody's under attack all the time.
It is. And there were some interesting statistics came out of that one, that 70% of cyber attacks now are focused on SMBs. Michael George gave that statistic there. So this isn't something that only affects the enterprises, and it isn't something that's only going to happen to the next guy along. This is affecting SMBs all the time.
Yes. Well, I would say on average, every client I've ever had has spent billions of dollars less than any company in the Fortune 500, right? So, what they've spent on security is much smaller. So obviously SMB is going to be more vulnerable.
Michael actually asked for a show of hands from the audience, which of their clients have been affected by cybersecurity. And out of a room full of around 400 people, there was 5 people put their hand up who said they hadn't been affected. Their clients hadn't been affected by cybersecurity. So I'm not saying those MSPs with their hands up are telling fibs, but maybe their clients have just not volunteered to them that they've actually had issues, or they're just not aware of it at this stage. I think nearly everybody I know has been affected.
Right.
So that was the Continuum European Partner Summit, attended by over 400 people. What's been going on for you, Carl? What story has caught your eye this week?
Well, along a theme that you and I have had since we started this little segment for Ovic podcast is the artificial intelligence. Last week, Google announced that they have a public beta of their Tensor Processing Units. So we're in this era where the number of transistors in a processor has grown to the point where they're so small that we may have reached a physical limit. Transistors are now smaller than viruses. And so in the last several years, people have moved to GPUs, which is graphical processor units, because they can write so much more data in a 3-dimensional database. And where this ties into SMB is really interesting, because the move to GPUs has dramatically increased the price of high-end graphics cards. There's literally a shortage of graphics cards worldwide. So if you're building CAD systems for clients, or you're building gaming systems, you are charging hundreds of dollars more than you did a few years ago, because you can't get the good cards at a good price. So Google has released the Tensor processor, which is intended to be something where you and I, literally, without any knowledge of artificial intelligence programming, we can program these processors to learn machine learning, and then even better than that, take it to the next level and apply that learning in certain situations and have access in the cloud to 180 teraflops of performance for $6.50 an hour.
That's a lot of flop.
It's unbelievable. You talk about being in an exponential world. The growth of processing units available to us has literally, as of this month, exploded. Anybody can have access to it onto the Google site.
So what does this mean in real terms? I mean, I'm looking at the story, which will again feature in the show notes. It's from Extreme Tech, Google's AI cloud Tensor Processing Units now available for public machine learning. The news here really was that Google never made its first generation of these chips available, but now they are. But what does it mean in practical terms? We throw these phrases around, don't we, Carl? AI, machine learning, but what does it mean in real world terms for MSPs?
Well, if you've been following Microsoft for the last, say, 10 years, they've moved away from focusing on products. Like if you want a Microsoft certification, you used to go get a certification in servers or in networking or in some specific product. And they have moved almost their entire partner network to development. More and more, the role of small business consultants has included programming, has included some kind of development stuff. And this is just a huge step in the direction of allowing us, without having to learn massive programming, we can have access to this and we can help develop products for our clients and so forth. On the other hand, it also helps us, if you're a machine builder, to have access to what we hope is cheaper video cards going forward. So it's this weird thing where two completely seemingly unrelated topics both affect us.
And the article goes on to say that Google's new cloud offering being billed by the second and an average cost of $6.50 per hour. It's just incredible cost, isn't it? Could be a game changer, couldn't it?
Yes. Well, what's interesting in terms of it affecting our space, I mentioned this as an example of exponential growth at one of my roadshows in Phoenix, and two guys in the crowd immediately started texting people on their staff and saying, you have to check this out. I want to see what development opportunities are available to us, literally in real time.
Yeah. Well, one of the stories that came out of it, Google actually claiming that even at this early stage, a researcher following one of their tutorials could train a machine learning network on the public TPU network, really high accuracy in less than a day for under $200. We talked earlier on about cybersecurity no longer being an issue just for enterprises. It's a small business thing as well. This is a story that affects small businesses. It affects everybody. Well under $200. Wow. And
imagine what the bad guys are going to be able to do with this, because whether you like it or not, being able to say, okay, I've got all of this data that I bought on the dark web. I have hundreds of millions of people's private information. I need to be able to go through that very quickly and attack so suddenly that the systems can't shut me out before I've gotten a few $100s for each one of those. You know, it's alarming what could happen on the bad side, and it's amazing what can happen on the good side, because we also have the situation where you say, well, I need to analyze some data. So, for example, with regard to healthcare, we can analyze massive amounts of data almost instantaneously. And so as soon as we figure out as human beings how to ask the right questions, the possibility for getting good answers, it goes up dramatically.
In 10 years from now, it's going to be difficult to remember how we had anything other than this amount of computing power available to us. So definitely one to watch. And again, in practical terms, if you want to jump in and have a look at this new Google offering, it's open in public beta now. So you can actually jump in and sign up for it immediately and give it a go. And
Yes.
at those sort of prices, why wouldn't you?
Google actually has many blog posts and how-to videos, and they want to make this as easy as possible. It's almost like little kids today are going to grow up. This is going to be a normal thing that's available to them.
Yeah, exciting times. So that's what's been going on this week. What are you up to next, Carl? Are you on the road?
Yes, on my way to Charleston, South Carolina for one of my SMB roadshows. And then I think after that, I'm going to go to New Orleans and meet up with a friend of mine who's going to also speak at my SMB roadshow.
Well, that's interesting, Carl, because I'm going to be in New Orleans as well. So maybe we should get together.
Maybe you should speak at my roadshow. Maybe we should do one of our podcast segments live from New Orleans.
You think so? Let's do that then. Yeah, so if you're an OVIC podcast listener, frankly, MSP listener, come and join Karl and I in New Orleans, and we're going to do something that could turn out to be incredibly good or an incredibly terrible idea, but we're going to do a live podcast from there with questions from the audience. So please come along and join us for that one. As for myself, I'm going to be on the road in the next week or so. I'm going to be in Edinburgh, Scotland for the Datto Autotask First Look Tour. So if you're an MSP in Scotland, come and say hello to me there. That's the 27th of March in Edinburgh, Scotland. And then, as we say, I'll see you in New Orleans. So, Karl, looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in what I hope is going to be a lot warmer, sunnier New Orleans than I am here today in wet and windy London.
I promise better weather than what you're having now. I don't even know what it is, but I promise it's better.
I shall hold you to account for that one. Karl, thank you for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. That's what's been going on, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
You're listening to Frankly MSP.
I'll put links to the articles and resources Karl and Richard discussed in today's show notes at avic.com/franklymsp/014. Now we come to my interview with David Pence, founder and CEO of Acumen IT. As you'll hear, for the first 10 years of its existence, Acumen definitely followed the conventional path. They grew very quickly and won many awards for that growth. But then the 2007 recession happened, and David had an interesting breakthrough. Hi, David. Welcome to Frankly MSP.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Heard a really interesting story about you, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Acumen IT, which is your MSP, was founded in 1999, and over the years, the company has been, to all appearances, a model of success to emulate. You've won lots of awards. You've consistently grown year over year. You were even on the Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing companies in America for 3 years. But then in 2014, you had a realization. What was it?
Well, we had grown, started in 99. In 2007, we had about 52 staff. And then the Great Recession started to settle in there. And we had a bit of a reduction, as some people did, and most people did. And we went down to about 40 staff, actually. Then we hired back again. And around 2014, we were back up to close to 50 staff. And, you don't want to thank recessions for a lot of stuff. But I will tell you that that recession actually taught me that, wow, we were a little bit more of a leaner machine down at the 40 range. So, hey, do we need to grow from 50 to 100 to 200? People say, a lot of cliches are, you're either growing or you're dying. I think I finally got over that cliche in 2014, and I looked at a lot of our customers, which are professional services organizations, and I looked at this law firm or this doctor's office or this engineering firm or this architecture firm, and I realized these guys are 25 people, they're 35 people, and they're happy, and the ownership there, they're doing well, and they've decided that, we're a 28-person law firm, and we're probably going to be a 28-person law firm 5 years from now because we're just happy. I thought that was pretty exciting. So I kind of jumped off the you're either growing or dying world and realized that we're a professional services organization, and profitability is more important to me, and happiness is more important to me than growth and constant strain and that kind of thing. I will tell you a little bit more about the realization is that Paul Dipple, who does service leadership and speaks to us in a CEO roundtable groups that I'm in occasionally, he showed us some statistics of companies that are where we are and showed us the profitability for these groups. He showed it to us in a way that blew my mind. Oh, here's people that have under 15 employees. Here's people that have under 30. Here's under 60 employees. And here's over 60 employees in my industry. And guess what? The most profitable group, percentage-wise, I think the smaller guys were probably the most profitable, under 15 employees. But a lot of times they were not putting their salaries in the figures. So it really kind of distorted it a little bit. In other words, if they paid themselves what they should have paid themselves, the profitabilities may have been a little bit lower, maybe significantly lower. But the organized crew, once you have 20 or 40 or 60 or 80 employees, you run things a little bit differently. The most profitable group was under 30 employees. And I thought, I have been happiest. We were the most profitable. I went back and looked at my books over the last 20 years when we had under 30 or 35 employees. So I decided that I was going to follow Paul Dipple's data. And as we had natural attrition, or if we had some salespeople that weren't working out or whatever, I said, I am not replacing these people. I'm going to see what we can do. So we got it down from about 50 employees down to about 32 from 2014 until now. And we've added a couple. We're probably at like 34 right now.
And how did you position that shift with your existing employees? Because that is a bit of an unusual message for an employer to share, that we're going to be downsizing instead of growing, not because we're suffering, but because we want to.
Yeah. When I mentioned the idea to some of my managers that we need to follow Paul Dipple and look at these percentages, anybody that is employed is going to look around and be like, I don't know if this is a great idea, David. So we got some of that originally. Fortunately for us, we've had other companies. We had multiple divisions. As an example, we had a ERP accounting software division, and we've had people that have wanted to purchase that division. So we actually sold that division off, and the staff that worked for that division simply stopped driving to my parking lot. They drove to another parking lot a couple miles from here, and poof, we're not focused on that anymore. How easy is it to focus on 3 or 4 or 5 things or 20 things? It's not. So by selling off a couple of our divisions that we weren't as passionate about and being really passionate about where we started, I think that was an awesome message to tell our staff that are in the divisions where we started. They loved it. The people that are in the divisions where we started, oh man, this is awesome. The other thing we did, though, is we may have consolidated. Maybe we had 2 people in our procurement department. We said, look, we're getting rid of this division, and we had this number of salespeople, and we're going to cut down to just this number of salespeople. I'm not sure if you're going to have to create as many proposals for the sales force if we have half the sales force. So we had attrition. We had one of our procurement people decide he wanted to take a job somewhere else on his own. And we just said, great, we're not replacing that. We did not let that person go. We have just cut through attrition. And if we've had some C players, obviously we've let some people go too. But a lot of it was just allowing ourselves to rebalance over a multiple year period. That was 2014, like you said, that I had the realization. Well, guess what? In 2018, we had the best year we've ever had in the history of the company. We were the most profitable.
Wow. Can you talk about some of those numbers and the differences in numbers that you've seen? So there was, you said 2007, and then a dip, and then up in 2014 when you were a bit bigger, and now smaller again?
Right. So up and down, right? So currently we have about 34 employees. Another number is when I first started Acumen 20 years ago, I think, we're going to grow. We're having an office in 12 different locations. Well, guess what? Running offices in 12 different locations is a lot of work. It's a lot of management. So I would tell people that they should be careful. That being said, we've decided that South Carolina is going to be our market. We pretty much are the top managed services provider in the upstate of South Carolina, which is, South Carolina is a triangle. You divide it into 3 slices. The upper left piece, we're pretty tops there. We are investing in a staff or 2 in Columbia, which is the Midlands, and we're going to invest in a staff or 2 in Charleston, which is the lower state. But guess what? Our plan is not to add headcount. Our plan is when we have some turnover, we're going to keep the number of people in the whole company the same, but we're going to either move somebody to one of those other places, or we're going to hire versus an attrition that happened in our main location. And what's neat about that is that we can all still collaborate with each other. We can get some stuff done, but we can have more relationships with a slightly bigger market, but we're still not increasing our headcount. Profitability wise, we're way under. I wish we were higher, but Paul Dipple's example of best in breed, a lot of these guys might be making a 20% margin. Well, that would be under 30 employees, by the way. Under 30 employees, he might tell you, look, you can get a 20% margin on your entire business on average. We're underneath that. We probably bring in half of that as an example. The bigger companies that are over 60 employees or up to 60, their margins are like, terrible. They're 5%. And then over 60, they're struggling to make 2 or 3%. And that might shock a lot of people who currently are listening to this and they've got an 11-person business and they're making 23% because they pay themselves, the bare minimum or something. And they're like, wow, our company made 23%. You have 11 people. As you grow to 90, you're going to be thrilled to make 3%. And boy, if I'd have known that early on, I never would try to run towards 90 people. So I just think it's neat that the statistics don't lie. These are the statistics, and that's the way it is. And you can either accept it. And I'll tell you one other thing. We used to say early on, well, that's what other people do. They're not us. They're not Acumen. Well, guess what? Actually, it is true. And unless you're in some specific area that has some sort of advantage economically, it really is true that most of these businesses, as they grow, become less profitable percentage-wise.
So you said your profit is hovering around 10% right now. You said this was one of your better years?
Yep, because remember, when we're 52 people, maybe we made a 2% profit or 4% profit, just like the average of every other 50-person managed services practice. If you hear managed services practices running out there and say, well, we've got 55 people and we made 25%, we'd love to see them. That's the silver bullet that doesn't exist. Now, there are one or two, maybe, but it's definitely not the norm. So the norm is much less than that.
Do you find it's much more difficult to manage the firm to stay level than it is to focus on growth? Staying level can be a tricky balancing act.
I think it's much easier to maintain and replace. Like if you take a look at your clients and you go in and say, well, we've got a couple hundred clients, we've got 200 clients, and we're going to go look at the bottom quartile. We use something called effective bill rate. So we're not billing people by the hour. We're charging monthly contracts, but we know how many hours we've applied to that contract. And so what is our effective bill rate had we billed by the hour? And we go in and gosh, if clients are just killing us, then we go talk to them and we either eliminate them or adjust their contract, and we will replace a C player client with an A- or B+ or A+ client if we can find one. We raise margins that way by paying attention to our base instead of running down the road with our hair on fire trying to find the next 5 clients.
You've mentioned before that there is this pressure on MSPs, or this perceived pressure on MSPs and business owners in general to always be growing, right? That grow or die kind of thing. How have you let that go?
Well, again, I just looked around at some of our customers. MSPs have not been around for 50 years. It wasn't even in existence 50 years ago. So let's say that the oldest MSPs today are 30 years old. Ours is 20 years old. We're one of the older ones, but I've met guys who've been in business 10 years longer than me. But I have not met a managed services practice that's been in business 40 years, as an example, because this just doesn't exist. So we only have maybe a 30-year run, and I know about 20 of those 30 years. But you can go look at law firms or accounting firms that have been in business for 100 years. And if you go look at them, they're professional services, we're professional services industries, as far as SIC codes are concerned. Plenty of them are just happy to be 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. Yes, they may merger. The fellow may get older, and it's Jones, and then there's Smith, and then it's Jones Smith, and now they're a 100-person organization or something like that. And that will happen over time. But in general, seeing Jones go from 20 people to 60 because, daggone it, I'm going to take over the world, is really actually a lot less of a reality than Jones being at 20 people and going to 22 and 24 and 26 and 10 or 15 years has gone by. But their profitability is up there.
So I know you once had an up-and-coming MSP approach you at a conference and ask for advice on getting to your size, which at the time was 50 people. What advice did you give him?
I said, you need to really think about it. Here at Acumen, when we are actually looking at managed services customer prospects, we look at their size. And here's a couple of rules that we follow. If a customer has less than 20 knowledge workers, let's say 10-person accounting firm or law firm or architecture firm, they are not a good prospect for us because they're so small at 10 people that they have not hit the levels of stress that they need to outsource a lot of stuff. 10-person accounting firm may just say, well, we just do our IT ourselves. We don't need managed services. So great, not worth a lot of our time. When they get over, we call it the magic rule of 20 here at Acumen. And we just made this up. I'm sure it's in some other business books somewhere that I haven't read yet. But for our own observations, we've said this is the magic rule of 20. When you see a customer at 22, 30, 40 employees, especially knowledge workers using computers every day, they have hit this milestone that they can't control everything anymore. They can't do it all. They need external help. And you'll find that those firms have found external law firms, external accounting firms, external whatever, and they need external IT firms too. So that's good for us. So on the flip side, we say, look, if you're in IT, when I met with this guy, I said, when you break through 20, you need to know that your management tactics when you're at 7 people now is completely different than what your management tactics are going to be when you're triple the size, say at 21. As a matter of fact, when you, Mr. IT guy, hit that magic rule of 20 and you have over 20 employees, you're going to have customers that are getting signed that you didn't know got signed. You're not going to be able to review every single contract, maybe even every single interview that happens to hire another staff. But you start to lose control a little bit, and you have to learn to let others manage, which is fine. But as you break up above 30 and 35, it becomes even more of a problem. Once I broke over 50, it was really a problem to allow everything to go. And listen, I'm not trying to be a control freak here. I'm happy to have others do it. It's just that you better have process and procedures. It takes a lot of documentation. I think most of the entrepreneurs that started their business from the ground up need to find another way to grow it past 30 or 40 people. So there's a lot of resistance there. So I told him that. I said, man, you're 7 people today, let's say. Look at how much profit you're going to have when you're at 25 people. And just mark my words, put it in your calendar, put a tattoo on your arm somewhere that says, David says 25 people. Really have a sit down before I push into 30, 35, 40, 45. And I said, I'll bet you that you're going to be shocked that 25 is that magic number, and you should stay at it and be happy.
Yeah, and that's excellent advice because, as I've mentioned, I think the current advice is always out there, grow, grow, grow. So this is a very interesting sort of counter argument. Thanks so much for your time today, David.
You're welcome.
That was David Pence, founder and CEO of Acumen IT. What do you think about David's story and his approach? Share your thoughts and your own experiences around growing an MSP business on today's show notes at auvic.com, AUV as in Victor, IK.com/FranklyMSP/014. We'd love to hear from you. And that's a wrap. Remember to subscribe to Frankly MSP in iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app to get every episode as it drops. Next episode, I talk to channel veteran Jay McBain about being born in the cloud and what these new companies mean for the managed services business model in the next few years. Till next time, this is Jennifer Tribe. Thanks for listening.
Frankly MSP, brought to you by Auvic Networks, the most efficient and profitable way to manage your clients' networks.